Hey everyone, I'm Jordan Galloway. Thanks for checking out Jordan Galloway Music. Today I have a really simple exercise to develop pick control. It's called alternate picking. I have a couple different sections, so hopefully I figured out how to do the timestamps correctly, and if you want you can skip ahead to some of the more complex ones if you're already familiar with this exercise. But for those of you who aren't, here is basic alternate picking. Okay, so basic alternate picking, all we're going to do is go down and then up on the same string, just like this. Okay? Ideally, you're practicing with a metronome so that you can practice being really specific and consistent with your speed. What's great about using a metronome is you can pick the speed that you're comfortable with to start, and then you can have a goal. So if you can nail 100 beats per minute, but 120 beats per minute is a bit of a challenge, using the metronome, you can set it to 105, 110, 115, and scaffold your skill set up. So eventually you can kind of hit those goals. But for now, just pick something easy. Find a really comfortable place to play so that you can master the skill in a really specific, controlled way, and then you can really take it to the next level. But if you can't play it slow, you should not be trying to play it fast. Okay? So first and foremost, with our pick, we want to try to keep a 90-degree angle with the floor. So try to keep it flat like this, and you've got a nice 90-degree angle with the guitar, the ceiling, your pick, the floor, that kind of thinking. Okay? So we want to be really specific, so just focus on those skills. There's lots of different ways to hold your pick. Check out online, there's tons of different resources and different players who have held them different ways throughout the years. Find the way that's comfortable for you. Okay? So, alternate picking, down, up on the same string. Try to keep the volumes consistent. You don't want one note to be a lot louder than the others because that kind of says that maybe you're not in control of your playing. It's also really important to be able to skip strings. So now I'm on the A string, okay? And ideally, you should be able to do this with feeling, just from feeling where the strings are, sensing kind of the distance they are apart. There we go. Okay, so I'm keeping a relatively consistent speed, but because I'm not practicing with a metronome, it's not dead on every time. That's the advantage to using a metronome. So I really recommend using a metronome for all of your practices, and this one is definitely no exception. Okay, so now that you're familiar with the basic alternate picking exercise, let's talk about how you can enrich it just to get more out of your time, out of your practice time. So we're already going down, up on the same string. Let's add a couple dynamics. Okay, so if you want the Italian terms, there's piano and forte, which basically just means soft and strong. Okay, so pick softly if you want it to be quiet. Don't hit it very hard. This takes a different amount of control than picking forte or hitting it strong. Right? Your muscles are just engaged a little bit differently. Okay, so it's important to be able to pick a dynamic and stick with it. So if you're going to pick piano, stay on it for a while and just really focus on that skill. If you're going to pick forte, pick it for a while and stay consistent on that dynamic. That will allow you to practice these crescendos and decrescendos a little bit more. Another word for decrescendo is diminuendo. But again, if you don't know your music theory terms, that doesn't really matter. That's just language that's supposed to serve you. So if it's not serving you, forget about it. Instead of crescendo, we're going to go from a quiet sound to a loud sound. That's something that everyone can relate to, right? So we're going to get something really quiet. And we're just going to build up that sound until you're playing as loud as you can. That's a crescendo. A decrescendo, also called a diminuendo, does the opposite. We're going to start off loud and we're going to get quiet, okay? So we'll start off up here. And bring the volume down gradually. And you end nice and quiet. Adding those dynamics is going to allow you to play more dynamically. You play how you practice, so you want to practice with as much expression as possible too. But it's about control, right? In music, we don't always make conscious choices. Sometimes we want the music just to flow out of us, and that's great. But we need the skills at our disposal so that we can make as many choices as possible, and then we can let go. Then we can let the music guide us, right? But this right now is about control. So let's work on a timing one too. So right now we're really just doing straight eighth notes, but for jazz and blues players, there's a lot of swing involved, right? So you can definitely try this exact same alternate picking exercise, but just swing your notes instead. So instead of do, 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 same length, do a long, short rhythm. That fits a little more in with blues, right? Do, 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 do. Okay, so that's just one little timing change you can do. Now, if you really want to layer this exercise, change the timing and add the dynamics. So maybe you're playing this one, you're adding a crescendo, but you're swinging it the whole time. That's just going to make it a little more challenging for you. And if you're doing these challenging things, but you can control them and you can manage them, it's going to make you a lot more dynamic in your playing. Okay, so hopefully you can apply some dynamics onto that exercise just to enrich it and get a little bit more out of your practice time. Another layer you can add on to this exercise to make it a little more complicated is the idea of skipping strings. So right now we're just going down, up on the same string over and over, and you can change the rhythm, you can add dynamics. There's a lot of ways that you can enrich the exercise while staying on one string. Okay, so all of those different techniques, all the different ways you can extend the exercise apply to this one as well. The only other layer we're going to add now is string skipping. So instead of staying on the E string, we're going to go from the E to the A. Okay, so we're just skipping one string at a time. But there's no reason you can't try all these other strings too. So now I'm skipping all the way up to the G. And ideally you can do this without looking. So I'm trying to focus really hard right now. There we go. Okay. Again, slow, consistent, all the same practice advice I can give you I gave you in the basic exercise, apply that over here too. And apply it to all of your practices. Start off slow and nail it. If you're not nailing it at a slow speed and you're not in control at a slow speed, there's no reason that you should be practicing it fast. You know what I mean? If you can't do this consistently, you shouldn't be trying anything too crazy. You need to be able to nail those basics, nail them consistently, and then go further. So if you feel like you're ready, check out the next two chunks of this exercise where we explore the minor scale and the major scale and a little bit of improvisation. Okay, so hopefully by now you've practiced skipping strings a couple times, you've added a couple dynamics, you've changed the rhythm up, and you've just played around with this exercise to get more and more familiar with it. We're going to add a layer now. So now we're going to shift our thinking away from the pick control, okay? Because now we're going to be doing something over and over, the exact same. We're just going to go down on the E and up on the A. Just for now. Until you learn this exercise, don't worry about adding dynamics. Don't worry about adding the swing rhythm or anything like that. We can add that later, okay? But for right now, we're going to shift our focus into learning how to create and resolve tension while understanding the patterns that fit in first the minor scale, and then I'll go over the major scale. Okay, so in both the minor and the major scale, they share some similar notes. Okay, they share the dominant, or the 5th degree of the scale, and they share the subdominant, the 4th degree of the scale. So the first thing we're going to do is pick down on the E and then up on the A string, but make sure your pointer is on the 2nd fret. So we're going down on an E and then up on a B. Okay, so that's going from the 1st to the 5th degree of the scale. Okay, if we're talking about tension, this is a pretty resolved spot to be. If we want to create a little tension, take your pointer off. Now we're hitting the 4th degree. Okay, now we're hitting the subdominant. Okay, so that already gives you something to play around with. Alright, so if you're already familiar with the structures that make the minor and the major scale, then that's great, but if you're not, that's alright. What we're going to worry about first is the intervals that happen after the dominant. Okay, in the minor scale, we're going from the 5th degree of the scale to the 6th, to the 7th, and then to the octave. Starting on the 2nd fret, we're going to move up a half step to the 3rd fret, move up a whole step to the 5th fret, and then we'll move up another whole step to get to the 7th fret, which is the octave. This is an E, so in the end we're going to hit down on the E and then up on the E, which is played on the A string. Okay? So, here's where we start. Slide your pointer up a half step. We're going up a whole step next. And then go up another whole step. Okay? And you can definitely do this backwards too. Alright, so you can change the amount of down-up pairs that you do before you switch notes. So you can go 1, 2, 3, 4. You know, every 4 sets you kind of change your notes. You could do it every 2 notes. You could do it every set. So you could just go 1, 2, 3, 4. All the while just thinking of that idea of creating and resolving tension. Okay, so we've got our dominant and the subdominant below it. Then we've got the 6th degree, 7th degree, and the octave. Okay, so now we can continue extending this. Now that we're on the octave, let's treat it like just the tonic. So this is number 1 of the scale. Number 2 is a whole step up. And number 3 is a half step up. And then we go up a whole step to the subdominant again. So the 12th fret is the same as the open string, right? So here is an A, and you go up another whole step to get to that dominant again. Okay, so now we're on the 5th degree. We're going to work our way up there. So let's go back down to the tonic. Right now we're doing just an octave is the interval we're skipping. Okay, so take your pointer and go up a whole step first, then a half step, then a whole step. We're on the subdominant, go up a whole step to the dominant. And if you want, go way down, and you can kind of start where you were at the beginning. Okay, so I'm just going to play around for that on that pattern a little bit right now, just to show you guys how you can apply this into your improvising and how you can just play around with the idea of creating and resolving tension. Okay. So that's a little bit how you can explore the minor scale while practicing your alternate picking. You can take that exact same technique and apply it to any of the other strings. Except when you get over to the G and the B string, you have to do things a little bit differently. Because this just sounds kind of like garbage, because you're actually hitting the flat fifth or the sharp fourth or the tritone, whatever you want to call it. It's not a nice resolved sounding note. So anyways, you just have to start it off on the 3rd. Okay? But you can apply those same the same intervals between notes. So if you start on the dominant, the 5th degree, half step to the 6th degree, whole step to the 7th degree, and another whole step to finish it, and you can improvise around a lot on there. Okay, so that's the minor scale. Let's get into the major scale. Alright, so let's explore the major scale a little bit. Like I said before, they share the dominant and the subdominant, okay? So you can sync your rhythm up just by doing something like this, okay? Now the first thing that we need to change is the 6th degree of the scale. In a minor scale, it uses a minor 6th, right? So the space between a dominant, the 5th degree, and the 6th in the minor scale is this half step. But in major scale, it's a whole step. Okay? And after that whole step, there's another whole step, and it ends with a half step. Okay? So we're going to be going from the 2nd fret to the 4th fret to the 6th fret, ending on the 7th fret. The octave stays consistent too. Okay? So let's play around on that. You sync up. We'll go up a whole step. There's the whole again. And then we end up with this octave. Okay? Let's do that backwards. So we're on 7, 6, 4, 2, open, 2, 4, So I'm just messing around a little bit, but you can see we're just hitting those same note groups, creating and resolving tension. Right now it's resolved. There's a little tension. Let's resolve it. No problem. Okay, so after this root note, we go up a whole, then a half. Whole, whole, half. Okay, so again, that 12th fret, that's the subdominant. It's an octave higher than the A string. So if you go up to that 12th fret plus a whole step, which is the 14th fret way up here, now my pointer's on the dominant again. Okay, so we go from the dominant to the subdominant, 3rd degree of the scale, 2nd degree of the scale, and the octave. Okay, I'm going to mess around on this a little bit just to give you guys an idea of what we can do. So, while you're playing around with the minor and the major scale and you're shifting your focus to understanding the scales as opposed to developing your pick control, don't forget, we can still shift our focus back to the pick control. If you make a really consistent pattern using your left hand, that will allow your brain to think a little bit more about your pick, okay? So if you're going, let's just make a really simple pattern using the minor scale. Okay, 2nd fret, open, 3rd, and then back to the 2nd, okay? That's our little pattern. So if you take something like that and you add some dynamics, then you're still focusing on your pick control. You got a little bit of, just knowledge application while you're trying to keep your head wrapped around the structure of the scales. But let's try playing it piano for a sec. That definitely changes the energy of it. Let's see what it's like if I hit it really loud. What if we do a crescendo? And a decrescendo. Apply that swing. So all of those layers that we added on, there's some ways that you can make the alternate picking a little more fun to practice, but you're also really enriching your time. So you don't want to spend all your time just practicing this skill over and over. It can get really boring, although it can always be beneficial, especially if you're practicing with a metronome and you're really setting some speed goals for yourself and you're staying consistent, and you're... So honestly, as long as you're staying consistent and you're kind of tracking your growth, this exercise can take you a long way. But enriching it by adding dynamics, by adding the swing or exploring some of the scales and creating and resolving tension while you practice your alternate picking, is just another way to expand your expressive abilities while you're practicing. So I hope you really enjoyed this lesson. Please leave me some comments if you have some subjects that you want me to teach you about on guitar, or if there's some exercises you want to go over. If you have any questions or anything like that, just leave me a comment. Let me know what you would like to see in this channel. And don't forget to like and subscribe, because I am always looking for more subscribers. So anyways, thanks so much for checking this out. Once again, I am Jordan Galloway.